The silence that followed my message was deafening, like a vacuum swallowing years of fake affection. Maya stood at the window of her modest apartment, phone in hand, reading the unread messages piling up in her family chat. Her mother's last words, "You've changed since you moved abroad," still echoed, acidic and final. In that moment, she saw the truth behind every "we miss you" that came with a money request. Her brother Daniel's laughter, her cousin Anita's sweet tone, all transactional. "You all only loved the account, not the person," she whispered. Rain fell softly outside, tapping against the glass like muted applause to her awakening. The city below glowed indifferent under the orange haze of streetlights as Maya's reflection merged with her own teary stare. A woman stripped of illusions, reclaiming silence as strength. The following morning smelled of cold coffee and decision. Maya drafted a single message, "No more funds. I need peace." Her fingers hovered before pressing send, and with that motion, years of obligation dissolved. Across the city, Daniel stared at the message, eyes narrowing, pride bruised. "She thinks she's better now," he muttered, while their mother, Miriam, sat silent beside him, her rosary unmoving. The message spread through the family chat like wildfire. Questions, anger, guilt, none of which Maya could hear. Her world had gone quiet, save for the whisper of liberation threading through the air. 2 days later, silence grew heavier. Maya walked through the market alone, her steps echoing against wet pavement. Every face she passed reminded her of home, familiar yet distant. She bought herself a bouquet of lilies, their scent pure and forgiving. In her mind, she heard Daniel's voice replaying old demands, Miriam's soft guilt, and Anita's laughter wrapping around every favor asked. But the silence now felt sacred, not empty. "This piece cost me love that wasn't love," she murmured, setting the lilies in water as dusk embraced her kitchen. By the end of the week, her bank app showed no outgoing transfers. A small, ordinary number, but it felt monumental. She brewed tea slowly, savoring every motion as if rebuilding herself from muscle memory. Then came a knock, Anita's name on the intercom. Maya hesitated before pressing the buzzer. When Anita entered, her eyes carried neither warmth nor apology. "Only confusion. We thought you were joking," Anita said. Maya smiled faintly. No joke left to tell. Steam from the teacups curled between them like unspoken years. Night fell, the city glowing beyond her window once more. Maya's phone buzzed. A single message from her mother. "We'll talk when you're ready. No requests, no guilt, just space." For the first time in years, she smiled without the weight of expectation pressing behind it. She stepped onto her balcony, rain cooling her skin, the silence now a song she'd composed herself. Freedom, she realized, doesn't echo. It simply breathes. Weeks passed and the silence between Maya and her family hardened into distance. Yet beneath that quiet grew something fragile. Clarity. One morning she opened her journal and began writing letters she would never send, each addressed to someone who had shaped her guilt. "Daniel, I gave until I broke," she wrote, her pen trembling. Outside, sunlight sliced through the blinds, painting her small apartment in gold and shadow. She didn't need their answers anymore. Only her own. Somewhere across the ocean, Daniel scrolled through old photos, pausing on one where Maya had smiled at his graduation. He didn't know if he missed his sister or the comfort her generosity had brought. Across the ocean, Daniel's pride began to splinter under the weight of realization. The family's group chat grew silent, save for his mother's occasional prayers. One evening, Miriam sat by the window, whispering, "Maybe we forgot she was more than a wallet." Her rosary beads clicked softly between her fingers, each sound a small confession. Daniel stood behind her, his reflection merging with hers in the glass. 2 generations caught in the ache of their own expectations. The silence that once seemed like punishment now felt like consequence. Maya found herself at a cafe she used to frequent during her student years. The same crooked sign hung above the counter. The same barista smiled with polite detachment. But everything felt different now. She watched strangers laugh, couples share pastries, and thought about the emotional currency she'd spent on people who only saw her value in numbers. The air smelled of roasted beans and quiet beginnings. "I think I'm learning to love without obligation," she murmured, more to the steam rising from her cup than to anyone else. Back home, Daniel paced his room, guilt twisting in his chest. He drafted a message, erased it, then typed again. "Maya, I'm sorry. I never saw how much it cost you." He didn't send it, but the words lingered, raw and heavy. Outside, thunder rumbled, clouds collapsing over the city. For the first time, Daniel realized that silence could speak truths louder than apology. He sat on the edge of his bed, the phone glowing in his trembling hands, its screen illuminating the small beginnings of remorse. On a quiet Sunday evening, Maya stood before her mirror, adjusting the scarf she'd bought years ago for her mother. She wrapped it around her own shoulders now, a quiet inheritance of self. The apartment smelled of lavender and rain. She looked at herself not as a provider, not as a daughter to be drained, but as a woman who had reclaimed her worth. "I forgive them," she whispered, "but I want to go back." The silence answered gently, like an old friend who understood. The first true test of Maya's resolve came unexpectedly. Her phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "Maya, it's Daniel. Mom's been sick. We need help." The words hit her like a cold wind. For a moment, the old reflex stirred. Open the banking app. Solve the crisis. Silence the guilt. But she stopped, heart pounding. This time, she would answer differently. She called instead of transferring money. When Daniel picked up, her voice was calm, steady. "I'll come home," she said, "but not as your sponsor, only as your sister." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the sound of boundaries forming, of love learning to live without conditions. The plane hummed softly as Maya stared out the window, clouds stretching endlessly below. She hadn't been home in 3 years. Every vibration of the cabin carried both dread and hope. She replayed old memories, her mother humming while cooking, Daniel's laughter echoing through narrow halls, the weight of every request hidden behind affection. This time, she would return as someone new. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "I'm not their answer anymore." The engines roared, and the sky, vast and forgiving, carried her closer to the truth she had avoided for too long. Maya stepped off the taxi into the courtyard of her family's old home. The scent of damp earth and hibiscus surrounded her like a memory made flesh. Miriam stood by the door, frail but smiling faintly. "You came," her mother whispered. The years between them dissolved in that one sentence. Maya walked forward and embraced her, the silence between heartbeats louder than any apology. Daniel emerged from inside, hesitant, guilt stitched into every step. "I didn't know how to ask," he said softly. "Now you have," Maya replied. "And I'm here." Inside the house, everything looked smaller. The paint had peeled, photos faded, but the memories clung like dust in sunlight. Over dinner, silence filled the table until Miriam finally spoke. "We took from you because you made it so easy." Maya nodded, her gaze steady. "I wanted love to mean giving. I forgot it needs balance." Daniel looked down, shame thick in his throat. For the first time, there were no excuses, only truth. The food went cold, but something inside them began to thaw. The family, fractured by greed, began the slow work of remembering each other. Later that night, Maya stood outside beneath a sky washed clean by rain. The air smelled of renewal, Inside, she heard her mother humming again, softly, as Daniel cleared the dishes. It wasn't perfect. Too much had been said and unsaid. But for the first time, there was peace in the pauses. Maya tilted her face to the stars, feeling the quiet not as isolation, but as belonging. "This is what healing sounds like," she whispered, her reflection faint in the window beside her. It no longer mattered who had asked or taken, only who had learned to stop pretending love required payment. Morning came with the quiet hum of reconciliation. Maya woke to the smell of her mother's porridge, the same scent that once meant home. Miriam moved slower now, but her eyes carried warmth untouched by pride. "You sleep like peace itself," she said softly, and Maya smiled for the first time without hesitation. Daniel joined them, awkward but trying. The conversation was tentative, like testing ice that might still crack, yet beneath the surface something held. The clinking of spoons, the occasional laugh, they were small, fragile bridges being built over years of silence. Later that day, Maya walked through her childhood neighborhood. The once bustling streets now felt quieter, almost smaller, as if time had humbled them too. Children played in puddles left by last night's rain. The same laughter echoed from years ago. She passed the corner shop where she'd bought her first notebook, now run by a stranger. Everything had changed, yet everything whispered familiarity. She realized then that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about walking the same roads without resentment weighing the steps. Daniel found Maya in the courtyard that evening, tending to the old hibiscus plant their mother used to love. "You kept it alive," he said, kneeling beside her. "Barely," she replied, smiling faintly. There was a pause. Then Daniel spoke again, voice low. "I didn't just take your money. I took your trust." Maya looked at him, the air thick with the weight of years. "Then earn it back. Not with words, but with time." Daniel nodded, a quiet promise passing between them. The hibiscus swayed gently in the wind, red petals glistening like forgiveness made visible. That night, Miriam sat in her armchair, flipping through an old family album. The pictures told a story of love, blurred by dependency, of joy shadowed by expectation. When Maya joined her, Miriam reached out and touched her hand. "I don't have much time left," she said softly. "But I see now. You were always giving more than we deserved." Tears welled in Maya's eyes, but she didn't pull away. "You taught me love, Mama. I just had to learn where it ends and where I begin." The two women sat together, the past quietly making peace with the present. The next morning, the house filled with the aroma of jasmine tea and fresh air. Miriam's laughter drifted faintly from the living room as Daniel repaired an old chair. Maya stepped outside, feeling the earth beneath her bare feet. For years, she'd felt like a stranger in her own story, but now she belonged again. Not because of what she gave, but because of who she was. The wind carried the scent of hibiscus and home, and she closed her eyes, letting the moment settle into her bones. Love, she thought, doesn't ask. It grows. Weeks later, Maya sat by her mother's bedside, the steady rhythm of a heart monitor filling the room with fragile reassurance. Miriam's illness had deepened, but her spirit remained steady. "I'm proud of you," she murmured, eyes glistening with something beyond pain. "Peace." Maya squeezed her hand, their fingers entwined like roots that had weathered every storm. Daniel stood quietly at the doorway, his silence now full of understanding rather than distance. The air felt suspended, heavy with words they didn't need to say. For the first time, their family wasn't bound by money, but by the quiet grace of being present. After the hospital visit, Maya and Daniel walked along the seafront, waves whispering against the rocks. "I used to think strength meant providing," Maya said, her eyes tracing the horizon. "Now I think it means saying no." Daniel nodded, the ocean breeze tousling his hair. "You saying no saved us, even if it hurt first." They stood in silence, the kind that heals rather than divides. The tide rolled in, soft and unrelenting, erasing their footprints with every sweep. Family, Maya thought, isn't about debt. It's about learning to walk together again after the storm. One evening, Maya sat with her journal again, the same one that had once held her unsent letters. This time, she wrote not to them, but to herself. "You don't owe love to earn it," she penned, her handwriting steadier than before. She thought of the woman she had been, fearful, generous to a fault, and felt compassion, not regret. Her reflection in the window smiled back, faintly illuminated by the city's fading light. The silence that once haunted her now felt like companionship, a presence rather than an absence. She had not lost her family, she had simply found herself within it. Miriam's final days arrived quietly, like dusk fading into night. The family gathered around her bed, the air thick with love and surrender. She reached for Maya's and Daniel's hands, joining them. "You've both grown," she whispered, her breath a feather against the stillness. "That's all I ever prayed for." Tears came softly, unforced. When her breathing slowed and finally ceased, there was no wail, only reverence. Maya leaned down, kissed her mother's forehead and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me to stay, even when silence is the answer." The moment hung like light between worlds. After the funeral, the house felt hollow yet clean, like a wound beginning to close. Maya walked through the rooms one last time, touching the walls as if tracing the echoes of her childhood. Daniel waited by the gate with a single suitcase. Neither spoke. The morning sun spilled across the courtyard, lighting the hibiscus in bloom. Maya smiled softly. "She'd like that," Daniel said. "She would," Maya replied. As they stepped into the day, the silence followed. But this time, it wasn't absence. It was the sound of healing, of love, finally freed from transaction. Months later, Maya returned to her city life, carrying both grief and quiet strength in equal measure. The apartment felt different now, less like an escape, more like a home she had finally earned. The plants she'd once neglected now thrived on her windowsill. Her phone sat silent on the table, no messages demanding, no guilt gnawing. She brewed tea, opened the window, and watched the street below, awaken to morning bustle. "Peace doesn't mean distance," she whispered to herself. "It means choice." The city hummed softly, like a symphony that no longer needed her permission to play. Daniel visited her weeks later, unannounced but welcome. He carried no gifts, no expectations, just the simplicity of presence. They shared lunch in her kitchen, laughter flowing more easily this time. "You've changed this place," Daniel said, glancing around. "No," Maya replied, smiling. "I changed myself." The place followed. They talked for hours, about work, memories, even small dreams. And when he left, he hugged her as a brother, not a beggar. It was the quietest, purest love they had ever shared, unspoken but understood. That evening, Maya found herself walking along the same riverside she once visited when she felt most alone. Now, the sound of the water brought comfort instead of sorrow. Couples strolled past, musicians played quietly under the bridge, and the wind carried fragments of laughter. She thought of her mother's last words, of Daniel's effort, of her own rebirth. The current shimmered in gold under the setting sun, and she whispered, "I'm not who I was, but she helped me become this." The river, endless and forgiving, seemed to nod back. Later that week, Maya stood before a classroom of young women, her first day volunteering at a mentorship program. "You don't owe anyone your peace," she told them, her voice steady. The girls listened, some nodding, some blinking back tears. In their faces, she saw her younger self, the giver, the dreamer, the one afraid to disappoint. "Help others," she continued, "but never at the cost of yourself." When the session ended, they applauded quietly, and Maya felt something bloom inside her. a purpose not tied to money, but to meaning. That night, Maya sat on her balcony beneath a moon that felt almost maternal. The city lights pulsed softly below, echoing her heartbeat. She thought of everything, giving, losing, forgiving, and felt no bitterness, only gratitude. They taught me what love isn't, she murmured, so I could learn what it is. The wind brushed her hair, carrying faint echoes of her mother's lullabies. She lifted her face to the stars, smiling as though the whole sky was listening. Tomorrow would come quietly, and she would meet it with open hands, unafraid. A year later, Maya stood in her apartment surrounded by packed boxes. She had decided to move, not to run, but to grow. Her mother's scarf hung neatly on a chair, her journal tucked safely into her bag. Daniel had called that morning, his voice light, telling her he'd started helping at a community center in their hometown. "You were right," he'd said. "Giving feels better when it's your choice." Maya smiled at the thought, her heart both heavy and free. The silence in the apartment no longer felt like loss. It was simply the sound of transition, of a chapter closing softly behind her. The bus ride to her new neighborhood was quiet, lined with golden fields and distant rooftops. Maya leaned against the window, feeling the rhythm of the road beneath her. Every mile felt like a memory exhaled, her childhood home, the arguments, the laughter, the lessons. She wasn't running from her past. She was carrying its truth gently, like a keepsake that no longer hurt to hold. The reflection in the glass showed a woman not emptied by giving, but filled by surviving. The horizon shimmered, endless and kind. Her new apartment overlooked a small park, where children's laughter rose with the wind. The place was smaller, humbler, yet it felt entirely hers. She unpacked slowly, each item a piece of memory reclaimed. A photo of her mother, a letter from Daniel, the same teacups from her old kitchen. Later, she brewed jasmine tea and watched the park below, the sound of life filling her home. "This is peace," she whispered. Not the silence of distance, not the quiet of resentment, but the stillness that comes when nothing more needs to be proven. Months later, Daniel visited again, this time with a gentle knock instead of an urgent call. They spent the day cooking together, laughter filling the space where tension once lived. "Mom would have liked this," he said, stirring a pot. "She would have," Maya agreed. They toasted their tea, clinking cups lightly. "To what's left," Daniel said. Maya smiled. "To what remains." Outside, the rain began to fall. Not as a storm, but as a melody of renewal, washing away what no longer needed to stay. That night, after Daniel left, Maya stepped onto her balcony once more. The city below pulsed with life, unaware of the quiet revolution that had taken place within her. She looked up at the stars, the same ones she'd once wept beneath, and felt no ache, only gratitude. "They treated me like a sponsor," she said softly, almost smiling. "But I became my own foundation." The wind carried the words away, dissolving them into the night. Somewhere between memory and hope, Maya closed her eyes and breathed, whole and unburdened at last.